Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Naso, the second Torah portion in the book of Bamidbar. Now last week we began this fourth book of the Torah, Bamidbar, literally in the desert, the wilderness, the story of the wilderness, and it's also called the book of Numbers, and the sages call it the book of counting. And once again we're going to be learning, focusing on that remarkable, enigmatic generation of the desert that we so identify with, everything that they went through. Now this Torah portion, it's really about life in the deserts. It's an introduction to life in the desert. But first, I'd like to share some thoughts about last week's Torah portion, Bamidbar. We read it last week, the Shabbat, immediately preceding Shavuot, the festival of the giving of the Torah. And Parashat Bamidbar, the first Torah portion in this fourth book of the Torah, began with a census, counting of the people of Israel. And Rashi, the holy Rashi, important source of wisdom, he comments, he says, God is always counting the people of Israel because he loves them so. He's always counting them. He counted them when they left Egypt. He counted them when they fell at the debacle of the golden calf to know how many remained. He counted them when he came to rest his Shekhinah, his presence among them. The tabernacle was erected on the 1st of Nisan, and he counted them on the 1st of Iyar. And, the very specific amounts for the members of each tribe are given. That already teaches us a staggering idea. The Torah is emphasizing that every individual counts, that every individual has an identity, a name. It's a staggering idea to be included in the Torah, emphasizing how important each individual is and how each person has a specific role to play. It's actually even deeper, because there is an idea that it's actually prohibited to count people. We don't count people 1, 2, 3. There's an idea that brings about this idea of the evil eye. We don't count people. It's better that the exact amount of people is hidden. So the census is always taken in the Torah, always taken by the contribution of a half shekel. Each individual donates a 1/2 shekel per person, and those coins are counted rather than the heads, rather than the people. Now the half shekel contribution is used by the temple kohanim, by the priests in the temple, to purchase the korban tamid, the daily offering, which is brought in the holy temple, in the tabernacle at first, of course, on behalf of all of Israel. It's also used for the general upkeep of the temple, and thus, as it were, the identity of each individual finds expression through connection to the temple and in participation of what goes on there. Beautiful idea. And as Parashat Bamidbar continued, we learned of the formation of the encampments of Israel around the tabernacle, surrounding it like the heart of the nation. This idea of identity and purpose being centered on the Holy Temple began to take on even more significance. And now it's even further deepened in our Torah portion. But this beginning here, the idea of life in the desert, centered around the tabernacle, this explains everything. The stage is set, first of all, this notion of living life around the tabernacle bursts forth for us, and it's all about connection to the temple, this life in the desert. And in many ways, our lives are also, in a certain type of desert, this preparation for what we are yet to become. We just observed this week the festival of Shavuot, which is the anniversary of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. The sages talk about this idea. Why was the Torah given to Israel by God on a mountain in the middle of the wilderness? And the sages explain, they speak about this, they explain that the Torah was given by God in literally a no man's land, in a howling wilderness, because the Torah is free for the taking. And also, you have to be prepared to do without. You have to be prepared for a life, a minimalistic life, if you really want to make Torah your own. We have this whole awesome iconography of living life in the desert, finding our connection to the presence of God in our midst. And now here in Parashat Naso, all of a sudden, we find here in the 5th chapter the concept of the sota, the wayward wife. This is a man gets some sort of a inferiority complex, is it? Is it some sort of a self-confidence crisis that he's going through? He feels a certain jealousy for his wife, that perhaps she was unfaithful to him, but he can't exactly prove it. And Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, any man whose wife shall go astray and commit treachery against him, and a man could have lain with her carnally, but it was hidden from the eyes of the husband. She became secluded and could have been defiled. And she doesn't admit this, so there's a whole process having to do with a very deep connection to the Holy Temple. Here it's the Tabernacle, of course, where the man comes before the Kohen and his wife comes, and the Kohen has to take some earth from the floor of the Tabernacle and has to write the sacred name of God and actually cause it to be erased in water and administer this and everything that we read there. Why now? We're just settling down to life in the desert. We're all formulated around the tabernacle. We're all organized with our encampments and focused completely. And this fellow's not sure. He's got this spirit of jealousy. What brings them to this situation? The home unit, the most important reflection of godliness on a personal level. Husband and wife, how did things come down to this? That we have this crisis now. We just got here settling down with our heart beating the tabernacle, and I have this warning of the suspected adulteress. And by the way, the Torah is not chauvinistic. This whole principle applies to a man equally. If a man is not faithful, then he can't bring his wife. It's not going to work, the test. This is a very strange idea, how it works. It's hard to understand what is going on here. So Rashi, in his divine inspiration and his great wisdom, he writes, he says, why is it the previous subject that's introduced here, right before the Sotah, was dealing with the subject of what are called the priestly gifts? We read here in verse 9 of chapter 5, and every portion from any of the holies that the children of Israel bring to the Kohen shall be his. A man's holies shall be his, and what a man gives to the Kohen shall be his. And this is referring to the idea that there are portions that are given by the Israelites to the Kohanim. These are the priestly gifts. So Rashi points out, with his tremendous wisdom, divine inspiration, why are these two things next to each other? He says, it sounds kind of maybe tongue-in-cheek, we're not sure. He says, well, if a person holds back the gifts to the Kohen, ultimately he'll have to come to the Kohen to bring him the sota. Saying, well, because this person maybe was not giving the Kohen his just desert, he wasn't bringing him the gifts, he'll end up ultimately bringing his wife to him to have to administer the process of the sota. So what is Rashi saying here? He's surely not alluding to some sort of cosmic vengeance. It doesn't work like that. The priestly gifts, you know, they are those portions that are the Kohen's due. It's not about charity. The priests who officiate in the Holy Temple are not a charity case. It's not the Torah's intention that they be supported by the nation of Israel lest they fall into destitution. Now, the general view of tzedakah, of charity, is that the giver is higher than the receiver. But through giving the priestly gifts, the giver actually connects to the Kohen, and through him, the giver is elevated to a higher level. Now, here's the secret of what Rashi is really alluding to. You see, everything has material and spiritual content that give shape to that form. And so too regarding the giver and the receiver. The receiver is like the form, the raw material, and the giver is like the content which completes it. But with the priestly gifts, the process works the opposite way. The Israelite who gives it is like the raw material, and the Kohen is like the spiritual essence, the content that completes him. Through the priestly gift, the Israelite becomes connected to the Kohen, the priest who serves the cause of the Shekhinah. The divine presence in this world is like the conduit of that life force, and everything that is connected to him becomes like him and becomes completed. And the individual who holds back this gift from the Kohen separates himself from the opportunity and does not avail himself of the possibility of connection to the divine life force which the Kohen makes available. And this recalcitrant giver remains like raw material without form. The unit of man and wife are also like raw material and spiritual completion and form. And when a household is lacking the connection to everything that the Kohen represents, bringing forth from the Holy Temple, Rashi alludes when it is not giving over the priestly gift, meaning not seeking the wholeness, the completion, the meaning, then trouble develops. Life in the desert. The Parsha is getting us ready for the reality of everyday life, of keeping focused on the presence of God with us at all times. So we encounter another very unusual teaching in this week's Torah portion, in addition to Sota, which is so difficult to understand. We find the teaching of the Nazir, the Nazarite, who is a man or a woman who takes a vow of abstention, of disassociation, who feels that perhaps because the world is too much with us, he needs to draw stricter parameters. This person, the Torah seems to be considering this person maybe a bit missing the mark of what life is supposed to be, because at the conclusion of this term of abstinence, the person who took upon themselves this Nazirite vow of abstention brings a sin offering. Now, commentators are divided as to why should part of his offering be a sin offering. What did he do? What was his sin in wanting to get closer to God? Some maintain that it was a sin for him to deny himself those permitted pleasures of this world that he saw fit to abstain from because they were not forbidden to him by God. And in this view, he shouldn't have needed to seek extra piety. And that was an aspect of sin, not allowing oneself that which God wanted us to have, to work with, to draw from in this world. Others, a bit more exotically, maintain that the sin was ending the period of abstinence because this world, after all, between us, is not a simple place. It's not so simple to live a godly life, and thus, once the person made that decision and went for it, it's a pity to go back to the norm. But ultimately, the Torah is emphasizing to us that the norm is the thing. The norm that we strive for is the controlling factor in our lives, and our goal is to focus on the presence of God. That is the constant in our lives, as things are, life in the deserts. The suspected adulteress and the Nazarite, these are opposite extremes. But after we went through the compelling and riveting experience of the book of Leviticus, the manual for living with the Shekhinah in our midst, the divine presence, now we're just settling down, life in the desert, preparing to enter into the land. And that's why these things are brought up now, because these extremes in the human condition are really very common expressions of the stuff of everyday life. And thus, I think it's particularly beautiful that following the portion of the Nazarite and his offerings, we encounter right here in our Torah portion the priestly blessings. And this is the manner in which the children of Israel are blessed throughout the whole continuum of time. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons saying, so shall you bless the children of Israel." And this is the formula. Saying to them, this is the formula that is in use to this very day. This is the formula that is used daily in the Holy Temple by the Kohanim, bringing the divine blessing to the children of Israel, saying to them, may Hashem bless you and safeguard you. May Hashem illuminate his countenance for you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his countenance to you and establish peace for you. And the verse concludes, let them place my name upon the children of Israel, and I shall bless them. The Kohanim themselves, the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who are commanded to love the children of Israel selflessly and to give over this blessing, they've got nothing of their own. So how fitting, though, they are the vessel of peace. And this formula of the priestly blessing is called by our sages the greatest vessel that holds peace. And so, following the cataclysmic episode of the sotah, of the suspected adulteress, and the somewhat schizophrenic, perhaps, personality of the Nazarite who's looking for godliness in this world somehow, the priestly blessing comes and gives us the happy medium of living in this world, living life in the desert, in our terms, this world, with the blessing of Hashem upon us all the time. Now all this is preparation, again, for going into the land of Israel and building the Holy Temple. And then the major, dominant theme of the Torah portion that we encounter are the offerings of the princes. And this is really amazing because it was on the day, we read in the beginning of chapter 7, that Moshe finished erecting the tabernacle, that he anointed it and sanctified it and all its utensils, the altar and all its utensils, he had anointed and sanctified them. And then the leaders of Israel, the heads of the fathers' households, they brought offerings. And now every day a different Nasi, a different prince of one of the tribes, brings an offering. And the offerings are identical. And this takes many, many verses. The Torah enumerates the same exact offering that is brought by every single leader of every tribe. Now the Torah, as we all know, is extremely economical with words. And every single letter is meaningful and never wastes words. But here, suddenly, for some reason, that rule doesn't seem to apply in the case of the offerings of the 12 leaders of the tribes of Israel, even though their offerings are absolutely identical in every way. Not only does the Torah repeat the offering of each one, even though there's no change, the Torah even offers an additional 6 verses in summary at the conclusion of this section. Why all this repetition? And this is really amazing because these offerings were not commanded by God. And in fact, according to tradition, the princes were somewhat hesitant recalling. Remember, this is the dedication of the tabernacle where there's no chronological order here. We were interrupted with other things. We're going back now to that day, and the princes of the tribes want to bring these offerings, but they recall, do they not, what happened when Nadav and Avihu brought offerings that were not commanded. But this is on a different level, these offerings. And the Torah that's normally so economical does not hold back the full description of every single offering, even though it looks the same and sounds the same, but the intention of every single bringer was different. And even though they were not commanded in it, somehow, and this is a very beautiful tradition, prophetically, each one was motivated based on what this meant to them to bring the exact same thing with a different intention, and they were all somehow divinely inspired. At the same time, the strings of their instruments were plucked, and they knew to bring this offering. So what this was really all about was about each one finding his proper place within the camp of Israel. It's one camp that is full of individuals. Each tribe is different. Each flag is different. This is according to the number of their names. Everyone has a name. Everyone finds his place within his individuality. And this is a foundation. It's expressed here so beautifully regarding the offerings of the princes. True, they all brought similar offerings, but within the framework, it was individual for each one. And so there emerges in this parsha, in this Torah section, an image of life in the desert, focused around the divine presence in the tabernacle. And I think that it's quite apropos that this parsha follows the riveting experience that we just had on Shavuot, of reliving the receiving of Torah and making it a personal acquisition. Because just as the offerings of these individual leaders of the tribes was actually very personal and was a personal expression of their finding themselves within the nation of Israel, so too, it's very much like the idea of the Torah, which is individual and personal for each one of us. As we recently had occasion to mention the Torah of the womb, as the sages refer to it, the pre-birth experience of how our tradition teaches that every unborn child, before emerging from the womb of the mother, receives the knowledge of the entire Torah, is on the level of Adam. Before eating from the tree of knowledge, that's the expression that Talmud uses, that there's a candle lit at the head of the unborn child, and by whose light it sees from one end of the world to the other, meaning nothing yet has entered into that mix that is in any way negative. There's the original light of the 6 days of creation, the original Torah knowledge, and thus the receiving of the Torah at Sinai, which we live again every year, the recommitment to that covenant is an affirmation of our individuality, of our own personal commitment to the Torah, which is part of us that we already had, each one of us on our own level, before birth even, so that Torah study becomes also a déjà vu experience. And so too, as it was in the life of the individual, in the life of the nation, this is honed and developed in the desert. And the experience that the children of Israel are now going through in these wanderings that we are reading about in this Torah portion and in this book, they became etched into the collective consciousness of the nation, this generation of the desert, because that generation are the roots of the children of Israel. And so too, both the children of Israel and all those amongst the nations who attach themselves to the God of Israel and who seek His presence and who study Torah and who are motivated to see the rebuilding of the temple and understand the significance of the return of the divine presence to this earth, and understand that our lives, literally our lives in the desert, and with all of the foibles and all of the distractions and all of the possible trouble that can come up in our relationships, in the human experience, as are alluded to in this week's Torah portion, all of it is a question of focusing our energy, focusing our consciousness on that goal of remaining attached to the presence, the divine presence amongst us, and growing spiritually as we receive Torah, as we live surrounding the tabernacle, as we go through this generation of the desert, hopefully to be able to enter into the land of Israel, to make that a real and lasting and eternal acquisition.